This is Mikey Mason, and you're listening to Why We Game.
I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. My guest today is Kathleen King Mercury, game designer, educator, and all-around badass. Kathleen, how are you?
Feeling pretty badass. How did you know?
So I have you have the distinction of being the third female guest on my show. I was hoping you were going to be the first, but we spoke, and I was like, Kathleen, this is a real sausage fest that I've got going on over here on my website. And you said, and I quote, yeah, I was like, I'll bring the taco. And I was like, fan-fucking-tastic. So, Kathleen, if you have not heard my show before, basically what we do here is we talk about gamers who made gaming their profession. And you have done that on multiple facets. As an educator, you use games to educate. You served on the board of Geekway to the West for a long time and are currently on the board for the charity Meeples for Peeples. And you're a game designer on top of it. In fact, you've got a game, potentially two, coming out next year.
Yeah, I'm on the GAMA Education Advisory Committee, so that's another little one to throw in there.
Oh, now shame on me for feeling my homework, because I even fucking knew that. I even knew that.
I don't know that, GAMA's going through a whole lot right now, so I'm certainly hoping to be part of positive solutions towards the future. You know what I mean? So, I think that's all we can do. So, yeah. No, it's funny because it's all this stuff. Like, I've been teaching game design online to, this theoretically an international audience because it's this online course. And so it's just been really interesting seeing how all of these different opportunities have just sort of come about. It's funny because you and I were talking about this before we started recording. My students are not impressed by me at all. and that's a good thing, obviously, because I don't know that anybody really needs to be, but it does make me laugh though. But I try to use my experiences with them in a real meaningful way. And it's like, you guys, there is no reason in the world why I should be a game designer. I just kept doing it. I didn't set out to do this. It was just I had a funny idea and I made it work. And then I just loved everything about gaming. And, it happened, right? It was a path. It was a journey, but it just sort of happened. There wasn't any strong pre-design. And that's kind of all these different opportunities have been. So it's just been a super fun ride, honestly.
Well, if I may, I'm going to look at that from a different prism. I am going to say that you are brilliant and dedicated and have a kick-ass work ethic. You are charismatic and magnetic, and people want to work with you because you merit being worked with.
Well, that is super kind of you to say. And you know me well enough to know that I do have an ego. So I'm as you're saying all these things, I'm going, yep, sounds right.
But fuck off. But you're just like every other hardworking creative person. You're a glass cannon, right? You are brilliant and smart and beautiful, etc. But little things make great fractures.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part to consider with this, because one thing that was sort of important for me growing up was my sister Karen. My sister Karen decided at a very young age, apparently, that she wanted to be a clown in the circus. And when she turned 18, she started trying out for Ringling Brothers Clown College. And this was something where everybody was like, she doesn't have a snowball's chance. She couldn't juggle. She wasn't a tumbler. Even performance-wise for school productions, she tended to be behind the scenes more than she was up on stage. But she really wanted to do it. In the first year, she didn't get it. And then the second year that she tried out, she had a much better tryout and she didn't get it. And then her third year, she had this amazing tryout. And the thing is we all were in between all this, kind of rubbing our foreheads and oh, what are we going to do when Karen doesn't get it? What is it going to be when she realizes this isn't going to happen and all this other stuff? And she came home from this tryout bursting. Apparently, what had happened, because they do a lot of improv, it was so great that the clowns grabbed the VHS tape. There's a timeline for you. and like ran in the back. We were watching it over and over again. And it was like, if this was going to happen, you know what I mean? Like this was the year, like it couldn't have been better. And we were just like, oh God, this is going to be bad when she doesn't get in. This is going to be bad when she doesn't get in. This is going to be bad when she doesn't get in. And then one day she got a phone call from the director. And it's like, you don't get a phone call when you don't get in. And she got in. And she went to Ringling Brothers Clown College. She worked for a number of circuses. She worked for Ringling Brothers. And I learned a very important lesson back then of, you know, one, don't poo-poo somebody's weirdo dream, because it can happen if you care enough. Because that's the thing, because I've had her talk to my students. She's like, I'm average looking, you know, I'm average, you know, physique. I couldn't juggle. There was no reason why this should have happened for me other than I just wanted it more than everybody else. And Karen probably would have kept trying out every single year. I mean, really and truly, you know, so it's that sort of like, I would say my spirit animal is a rhino, big and stupid, and I run until I hit something. And I feel like if there's anything to take away from this, you know, it's not the world's worst approach. You know what I mean? Because you're going to get hit. You're going to take knocks. People are not going to like the stuff you do. They're going to critique you. There's going to be all that other stuff. And I've seen so many times at like game design meetups where somebody comes for the first time, puts the game on the table, they get bad feedback. We never see them again and never see the game again. You know, you have to be understanding that this is just when you're creative, there's a lot that goes into it physically, mentally, everything. And so I just keep going.
That's where I fail, right? Is that I'm so scared of getting crapped on. I have such a fragile ego, you know?
Yeah, well, I get that. I mean, that's, especially when you really care about something. You know, I just remember too because I'm a teacher, I teach middle school gifted kids. And I remember when I started, I was high school history. And when I started, and I had my first parent-teacher conferences, and my mom, I was talking with her ahead of time. My parents are both teachers. And my mom said, they're just as worried about what you're going to say as you're worried about what they're going to say. And I was like, you know, and that's one thing that just kind of, that was an important thing to sort of stick in my head is, you know, I'm on this with my parents at school, like we're on the same team, right? We want to do what's best for the kid. If there's a misunderstanding or something, sometimes mistakes are made, sure, you know, but if there's, generally speaking, if we're trying to do what's best for the kid, then we can be on the same team. And I think when it comes to like games and getting them play tested and stuff like that, if somebody hates my game, and I had a prototype once like picked up and flipped at me, like literally thrown at me.
No, you didn't.
Yeah. It was a really late, kind of raunchy and appropriate party game. I was just sort of trying out with some friends, and this one guy sat down, and I was like, and I kind of knew him and stuff like that. And he flipped the board at me. He's like, I'm not staying up late to play this bullshit, and flipped it at me. And I was like, well, you officially will get nothing from me ever again. So, you know, I mean, like, but on the other hand, you know, it's important to get that feedback because sometimes the purity of that response will tell you how people will respond. If I only play this with friends, they're like, oh my gosh, this is funny. This is hilarious. Like, that's a real piece of information that I'm missing. You know, if you look at every obstacle, it's like I read something somewhere recently, you know, it's real simplistic, but basically optimists look at obstacles as opportunities. Pessimists tend to see them as failures. And I definitely am an obstacle person. Like everything is an opportunity to learn something more or to, you know, get different information. So when it comes to play testing, I love bad play tests. I love when things go badly, when somebody exploits something that I didn't think could happen because the problems are there in a game. I need somebody to help pick them out, you know, and some designers are brilliant. They can just create these elegant, balanced machines in their heads, and then they put them on the table and they work pretty darn well from the start. You know, I'm not that. I come up with really bad games, but I also can play test them with students. So it kind of takes some of the pressure off, I guess, with adults. Right now, this year is obviously a little bit different, but then also, you know, but just in playing the game and like, I am someone who loves getting feedback and ideas from other people. Like the whole, like, what if? Some designers like it where they want you to play test the game and they want to be the ones to figure out what if on their own. I am definitely more on the tell me as much as you think that you would want to see in this game. I will go through and I will figure out from there. And I mean, obviously I have my own ideas too and stuff like that, but having an informed approach to because my whole purpose in what I teach is design thinking, understanding the needs of the user. So if there's something the user wants to see in a game, I give that an incredible amount of emphasis.
Right, but then obviously that's going to change from game to game, right? I mean, you don't want to deviate too much from the theme or the mechanic that you're exploring, I assume.
Well, I mean, generally, no. I mean, obviously, I would rather hear 99 pieces of advice that I would never use just in the hopes of getting the one that is amazing. I mean, on the 2 games that are hopefully coming out next year, both of them will have a student of mine credited in the comments because those 2 students gave a fix to both of those games that absolutely pushed the game forward a whole movement. One was a fix to a problem that I'd been struggling with for like a year. And he's like, well, what if you just did this? And I was just like, oh my God. And like, it can't be that simple. And literally, and this is in this racing game, and there's a press your luck aspect to the dice. And we'd already worked the dice to where like there was a pretty good range that you could have. It was possible somebody could roll crazy good or somebody crazy bad. And that happens with dice games, but it's a fast, fun little silly game. So that's fine. But we wanted to try to like bring that range down. And it was a student who suggested like how we could use this one die in a different way that literally added no new components or anything like that. Just, making sure people understood the rules with it. But literally it was a fix. And then I had another student for my dexterity game that's hopefully coming out next year too. The first one that I was talking about is Greek Lightning. It's racing Greek ships when the gods mess with you and stuff like that too. That's with WizKids. And then Ragnarok is one that I have with Kolossal Games. And in that game, it's a dexterity game. And I had basically 3 types of dexterity, different types of physical actions you could do. I wanted a 4th. And I had a student who picked up 2 components that I had on the table because I just had all kinds of clutter just for testing purposes and all this other stuff. And I just feel like, well, couldn't you do this and this? And I was like, oh my God, I don't even need to play test that. That's going to be going in the game forever. And in fact, in play testing, like there was one person who's like, Kathleen, I cannot tell you how strongly I feel that this one thing, this action in particular, is like, this is the whole game. This is all I want to do. I don't want to do anything else other than this action. This is what your game should be. I was like, okay. So kids have a much better unfiltered what if view on the world than adults do. And that's why I think my games benefit so much sometimes from having my students play them because they'll be like, and you're like, go on. Yes. And those are the moments where it's just like, cause I remember those 2 moments so specifically, like when you think back to where were you when I remember exactly when those 2 moments happened with those kids because of how much it just transformed everything.
How did you start? When did you get exposed to gaming and how long was it, after being exposed that you just dove into it? Like
14 years ago, I went to I teach gifted kids and I went to a gifted convention and there was a session on board games. And I thought, I love playing board games with my sisters. We would play Clue and all this other stuff. And at the session, the woman was talking about Stratego and how all gifted classes need to have a copy of Stratego. There's no better game for gifted kids. And I was like, huh. And I'd heard of it, sort of, but I only had sisters, so we didn't have boy games. So I started looking into Stratego, stumbled on BGG, found out about this whole other world of games, and then just happened to see on Craigslist, because I started looking there for games, and a woman was selling a copy of Shogun. And
the old like, Milton Bradley, James Clavell before James Clavell sued them?
No, the Rainer Knizia one.
Oh, also a good game. Yeah.
Yep. And so I saw a copy of that, and I was like, oh, that's one of the ones that popped up. And then I bought it. That person told me about the St. Louis Board Game Meetup group, and I was like, what? And I went, and my first night I played Pandemic and then Cash and Guns, and I was like, this is officially the most fun thing ever. Because I'd never played a co-op game before, which is funny because now I don't necessarily like them that much, but I'd never played a co-op game before. Cash and Guns just like blew my mind as far as like how different of a game it was and the type of experience that it had and how fun it was. I just started going to meetups, and I just had one time I was, after playing games so much, and then I just had this thought, like, wouldn't it be funny if you had a game where birds pooped on people? Because 2 things had happened. One, my sister had told me a story about how her daughter didn't want to take a bath, and they live in Germany. The kids have only lived in Germany, so her daughter said, "Ich nicht ein dirty bird." So that was funny. But then it reminded me of this Girl Scout song about, I'll sing it. Here we go. Oh, I wish I was a little dirty birdie, dirty birdie. Oh, I wish I was a little dirty birdie, dirty birdie. I go up on the steeple and poop on the people. Oh, I wish I was a little dirty birdie. And so then I thought, wouldn't it be funny? Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny because I tell my students not to put like applause files at the end of like presentations, because if the screen is applauding but nobody else is, that's real awkward. But thank you. I will assume that was meant well. Anyway,
it wasn't deep meant well. No, I'm experimenting with a new toy.
Well, as well you should. So anyway, so I just got this idea for like, wouldn't it be funny to have a game where birds poop on people? And so then thinking about how I would visually play all this out, you know, and thinking of like, almost like kind of like line of sight, but then I had the idea to make the board 3-dimensional and, built it. And, my ex-partner, current super friend, Mark Selmeyer, roommate, you know, life is modern, it's good. Anyway, he had tons and tons of game components because he was a game designer. He had a game with, Rio Grande come out. Called Spin Monkeys. Plus he does a bazillion different variations on Robo Rally. And he had some 3-dimensional blocks I could just start using. And I just started using it and getting some components and just sort of playing around with it and stuff. And, like it sort of started to come together as a game, you know? And so it was funny because I took it to BGG for their speed dating. And it was funny. I mean, one woman, she came up to me, she's like, I love that you're the only woman here. She's like, and you're wearing a bird dress. I'm like, I am, you know, because like nailing it. Anyway, the thing that was so funny, so publishers would sit down, see this enormous array of components, and they're like doing the math in their head about how much it's going to cost. But I decided I didn't care. I was going to make the game I wanted to make and then make whatever decisions later. I realized that you did ask a question about making changes, and I swear I'm going to get there.
I have realized that you should be a professional podcast guest, because this is like, as a game master at a role-playing game table, when the players just buy the plot hook, full down into the gullet and go, and you just sit back and don't pick up your fucking dice. I might fall asleep, so you just keep doing you.
Oh, gosh. If you fall asleep, that's not good. Well,
no,
anyway,
I'm kidding. I might fall asleep as in that there's so much pressure has been removed from me. You're so
good.
delightful that I can just relax and let my guard down.
Yeah. Chill out, man. That's good. Anyway, so I made this 3-dimensional thing. I took it to BGG. Publishers saw it. There was one publisher who, the more I talked about it, the more his face kept like collapsing in on himself. And I'm like, well, if he hates it, I'm going to make him really hate it. So I'm like, there's not just one dexterity element. There's 2. I mean, now there's 4 in current iteration. And there's science, and, you know, so, it was kind of funny. And so, but he's now a friend because of just me being in the industry and stuff like that. But the funny thing about that game was, so after the speed dating event was over, everybody gathered around my table, and different publishers are explaining to others, like, how you play the game. So it got like a huge impact. It was like great, hilarious, super fun. We can't make, you know, this is too expensive. And that's kind of what happened when I would schlep it around and stuff. And so finally it sat on the shelf for a couple years. And then, when Travis Chance announced that he was starting Kolossal Games, and he was looking for big, splashy, Kickstarter friendly things, and I was like, Travis, I got something for you. And so we met at Dice Tower, put it on the table, started playing it, and he just looked at me and he said, God damn it, Kathleen. I said, I know, because it's good. You know, there's nothing else out there like it. It's got great table presence and all that. And he's like, ah. And so in the end, like, we ended up signing it. And so and they've had it for a few years now, because it's hard. I mean, you know, Kolossal's a new gaming company and stuff like that, but also like, it's just hard with like the components, because it's a big game and trying to figure out how to make it manufacturable at a price point and stuff like that. So I always had in the back of my head that my alternate theme for it would be dragon. That's because, especially the birds pooping on people, you know, it's funny, but it's like, well, people want to pay $75, $100 for a big dexterity game about birds pooping on people, even though you were way more likely to get pooped on by a bird than get, you know, shot by fire from a dragon. But nevertheless, dragons are a little bit more sellable. So and I brought that up from the beginning, and I think it is important as a designer to know where your points of flexibility are. I think if you're like, no, none of these changes, this is the only way it can be. It's unfortunate that you can be seen as standing your ground, which is great. You also can be really limiting yourself, because at the end of the day, a publisher has to sell a product they can stand behind. And if they want to make changes so it's something that fits their line better, that they can stand behind, you have to consider that. You know what I mean? Like, was I sad that losing the bird theme? Yes. There was one particular action in the game that we had to remove for flow which I really loved and thought was hilarious. And it was, but it made sense to take it out. And it's funny because at one particular action, I thought, if I can lose this in a game, then basically I'm up to make any type of changes that need to be made. So I'm pretty flexible, in terms of a game. Because one person who had a real impact on me was Peggy Brown, who is a publisher for like Hasbro and all that, like 200 plus games she's had out there. And when talking about selling a game, she's like, all I want to do is sell it so I can move on to the next project. Like, they stop being special for her. You know what I mean? Like, she cares about what she does and she does good work. But at the end of the day, like, it's a product that you're making for somebody else. And so, there are a couple things where, like, as we're developing Grease Lightning to get that one to the end, there were a couple points where I said basically yes and no, I really hate this. And here's why. Because in my playtesting, I found bang, 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 bang. So all these suggestions that you're coming up with for this game, I've already been through them. I understand why you're saying that, but this won't work. And this really is the best way. Now, if we can come up with a better way, if you really hate this, then that's a different thing we can work towards. And so I think doing the work too, when it comes to working with a publisher is important because, it's a process. At the end of the day, when I license it to them, they can do what they want with it, right? And that's okay because I'm kind of done. I want to move on to my next project. And so, there's always going to be, not everything's going to be magic. Not everything's going to be rainbows. Some things aren't going to go as well as you want. But you know what? If you're designing the games you want for yourself, cash the check and move on,
But why did you decide to go at the mercenary route of selling the idea to a publisher versus kickstarting it yourself?
Because I absolutely, under no circumstances, want to start my own business as a publisher. Absolutely no interest whatsoever. Because that's something that would come up a lot, especially with my students' work. People see like, these games are really great. You should have that. You should kickstart them and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it would be a great project for my students. But considering how long it takes to conceptualizing a game and to actual delivery into people's hands after Kickstarter, that's years. So that means the kids that I have in class would move on, and I'm the one running this Kickstarter business. Likewise, the same way, when it comes to all the work that's involved to run a successful campaign, it's a full-time job and it's a real job. There's people who basically make their funding levels and that's great and they're happy and that's what they wanted to do. And then there's people who just blow it out of the park who are few and far between. We're kind of past the era for Kickstarter of a game on Kickstarter can be successful, right? We've been long past that point for a while. So it has to be something that really stands out well. And you need to hire people to do it well. And for me, my thing is I like making games and I love being a teacher. And for me, being a teacher comes first and foremost and game stuff is second. So if I were to start a business, that would probably eclipse the game design part. And if it eclipsed the teaching part, then that's where my real problem is. So I am more than happy to sell a game to a publisher, see what they do with it, work with them in that partnership, and let them deal with all the icky parts that I do not want to deal with.
What if you had the opportunity to do game design full time, though? What your games come out next year and you hit it big, right? You become a big name and you have the opportunity to do game design full time. Would you still stick with teaching?
Yes, because I am very selective about what I do and how I do it. There's no pressure on me to publish. There's no pressure on me to develop a certain number of games at a certain time frame. My summers are pretty open, obviously, so I can go to a lot of game conventions, get really involved in the gaming world and the game design community. In the summer, all these different game conventions. But then at the end, I have a really great job that I love and honestly probably make more money than a lot of people in the gaming world full time, So, because I don't just teach game design, I teach a whole bunch of other stuff too, because I do game design with my 7th graders. With my 8th graders, this year is different. But on the other hand, because this year is different and my kids are remote right now and they have iPads, we've been playing around with augmented reality and they've been learning how to make filters and create interactive experiences with the world around them. And it's something I never would have done because I just would have focused on using the iPad to facilitate what we were already doing. But we did a lot of work with film and I had to completely reinvent how we did film because, they could make movies at home, and so I think, and then I also do a cosplay unit every October, except for this one where my classroom just becomes this big costume creature workshop where the kids build all their costumes and stuff like that. And I've done stuff with RPGs and congressional debate and all kinds of stuff. It's like basically if I create a problem I can give my kids to solve where they have to produce output is what I want from them. I want them to be creators, not just consumers. So my job in of itself is so incredibly fulfilling. And also I have such autonomy over what I do and how I do it that if I don't like something, how it's going, I can change it. I can stop teaching something. I can start teaching something else. And it's cool. So I really, I love what I do. And so for me, the game stuff is definitely secondary because when you make something that you love so much, your job, because that's one thing, because when you're talking about gaming, game design is my job, not just for the one semester when I have seventh graders. It's my whole year. So, it infiltrates everything that I do. There are times when your hobby becomes work and work is not always fun. And when you resent what becomes your hobby, then that can be a real crisis as far as what do you do for fun then? Because then it's like if I start playing games, and I'm thinking about them as a designer and all this other stuff, it's kind of hard to shut that off and to just play. Sometimes that can be super annoying for people who I'm playing with because I want to I want to talk about this. I want to say how I don't like this. I want to try to do something else with this, and now that they're like, can we just play the game? Like, yes.
You have difficulty shutting off the designer element of your mind while you're playing games?
I have difficulty shutting the designer element off of my mind all the time, which is why when I really need to stop working, I read really trashy romantic fiction because it's something that I cannot share with students. I can't implement into what I do. Although a friend of mine were talking about doing a game based on romance covers and stuff like that, which makes me laugh. But no, I mean, I'm always thinking. I'm always thinking. I'm always going. And so, yeah, but especially when it comes to playing games, to be able to play a game and appreciate the work for it is, I'm not as a total jerk and I try not to do that. But that's one of the reasons why I really do love playtesting prototypes a lot because then I can rip it apart and say all the things I want to say and they're like, yes, go on. But when something's already done and hits the table, I was just talking about this with some friends earlier today. There was a game I did not like by a very well-known designer and just didn't like it. My preference, Lacerda game called Escape Plan. You know what I mean? And for people who love Lacerda and love his games and everything, it's awesome, right? Totally understand it. For me, just disconnect, didn't like it. And basically in the game, I was talking about figured out how I could end the game as quickly as possible. And then in the end, it came down to just one loot pick between my friend who'd been carefully planning and was going to have a killer endgame strategy if the game went all the way. But because they ended it as soon as I possibly could, it just came down to she had the one better loot pick than I did. And that's what I came in second. And I never should have, you know what I mean? Never should have. The amount of planning and work she was doing versus what I was doing, And again, that's just a personal preference as far as that game goes. Lacerda does amazing work, better game designer than I am. And I'm happy to say that. But it was just a preference thing. And so, but it was one of those things where I think because of my sort of fussiness with it, rather than exploring the game and really trying to get the full effect of what was in the game, I decided to take I'm done with this. I want to kind of get out of it. And I didn't cheat, you know what I mean? It's a real strategy. And considering it almost won, you could argue it wasn't maybe the worst strategy, right? But still, I think, I just try to be mindful, that when I'm playing a game, the funny thing is games that I've been have more and more appealed to me are Knizia games because there's a real purity to them in terms of the themes pace it on and I love thematic games, but just in terms of whatever type of transaction you have to do. A friend of mine, I don't even know how many times we've played Lost Cities on Board Game Arena during COVID. Because it's a game we both can agree on, but it's really, really fun. There's definitely a luck element to it, but there's definitely, we're missing things by not being able to bluff each other over the table. That would be a whole other, I've never played it like that, but just that sort of purity in terms of the design. So that's one thing that for the work that I'm doing now is really trying to hone in on the purity of what the play ritual is and how that impacts the larger game itself.
You mentioned earlier that you were no longer keen as you were, at least on co-op games. Why have you? What's the evolution of that?
I think it came down to one particular game of Mysterium where I figured out my clues round 1, round 2, round 3, and I didn't like it when other people were trying to tell me what to pick during round 1, round 2, 1, 3, and I did it, and then. Because I didn't want to tell anybody else what to do for their picks, I like to make my own decisions, you know, and so I just sat there for 45 minutes for the next few rounds and not trying, you know what I mean? Because I think especially when it comes to a game like that, it's like with code names, right? You could make any kind of argument for probably any word on the board for any clue if you're creative enough. You know what I mean? And it comes, and so when I play code names, I intentionally try to muddy the waters as much as possible for the other team, for that reason. But yeah, I like to make my own decisions, and yeah, I like to, and I don't like to tell. Yeah, and I don't like to tell other people what to do on their turn. You know what I mean? And so when the line gets really blurry between what I should do as a player versus what we should do as a player, and how easily, you know, like I could be a quarterbacker without question. So in response, I basically will bench myself so I don't take it over because I know, because I can, I will. Since I haven't really found that, you know, midfield, look at me sports, way to play. I just tend not to, but my same friend who loves Lost Cities loves Spirit Island. And I've played it, you know, and I see 100%, and Eric is amazing. He's such a cool person, but I don't think I was taught well, and it was pretty confusing and everything. And so for me, I want to experience that one with this one friend of mine. I said, because if I'm going to love it, I'm going to love playing with you because you love it, right? So we'll see. In 6 months or whenever we can see people again, hopefully not too much longer after that, then I welcome that.
If there's not a Gen Con 2021, I'm going to have stronger medicine to not kill myself. For me, co-op games are like role-playing games or intercourse. I don't want to do it with strangers. I don't want to engage in this intimate thing with people that I don't know because they're either going to make me angry or uncomfortable or both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Because there definitely is, like, for when it comes to teamwork, if there's somebody you don't know and you realize very quickly into this, like somebody playing with me being like, I don't like this girl because she talks a lot and tells me what to do. That would be totally fair. And then you're trapped with me, you know? I mean, trying to come up with, and I think the idea of, so an idea that I have for a game does have a co-op element, but then it could be flipped. And so trying to play with that, and it's more of a mental, like, kick it around in my head. I need to, like, make a prototype, but I don't know what I want to do yet. I'm just still kind of kicking it in my head because I want to play around in that space because I think it's a really interesting space as a designer. You have to design the board to be a viable fifth player to win 60, 70% of the time, you know, and make that fun and interesting where people think that 40 to 30% is really attainable every single time. You know, like, there's some really interesting kind of spaces when it comes to co-op designs. You know, there are certain things like Magic Maze does some really good stuff when it comes to co-op just because you can't talk.
Yeah, it's
you
fun.
Know, removing the ability.
It's frustrating as hell, but it's fun.
Right, exactly. You know, so I think there's definitely people playing around in this space, like Spirit Island is one, you know, where it's nearly impossible to quarterback everybody because of just how much stuff is going on. You know, like, there's definitely work people are to do that. It's just, I would, even if the game itself is good, they're like, I don't really like this.
Yeah, okay. I like co-op games quite a bit, but again, I generally only play them with friends or with my wife. Like, I've got a group of buddies that are coming over, and we've been playing Gloomhaven fairly regularly, even though we're tracking with whom we're having contact, and we've all been tested at least once, etc. But
sure.
Gloomhaven, I think, is a brilliant design of a game in terms of something that you play cooperatively, but the natural order of selecting and managing your actions and then things occurring and interrupting the way the initiative order works, it's impossible to quarterback. I think that game's brilliant, and I don't know what super AI computer was used to do the centuries of playtesting that must have been required.
Isaac's brain.
Really? Is that smart?
Yeah, he's got like a PhD in physics.
Oh, okay. Well, so my best friend in the world has a PhD in physics.
Well, tell him to get going on.
There's no way he's designing Gloomhaven. So.
No, I'm sure the game was play tested a ton too. And no, I think you're right about Gloomhaven being a really good example of a cooperative game that manages well to do that. I think you're right. And the nice thing too for Gloomhaven too is tapping into people wanting to have RPG experiences. but not wanting to GM, not wanting to do all that work, like that's built into, like he hit 2 big hammers on the head once, which is why it's a big, giant, literally monster game, you know? But I mean, I know people who played that game every single weekend, every single Saturday was like Gloomhaven Day with their groups of people, you know, and that's amazing that you can create something that gives people that type of experience. It's amazing.
There's an area game-wise where you and I diverge very, very severely. And I am fascinated when someone is into something that I don't like. Like, if one of my buddies tells me that they don't like ABBA, I want to sit them down and I just want to walk them through the litany of
like
reasons.
What happened to you?
Right. Why ABBA's brilliant, right? I fucking hate train games. And I don't mean Ticket to Ride, because that's not a train game. That's a set matching game. I'm talking about I am going to claw my fucking eyes out, crane on old weird slick board thing, and I've got these old shitty black and white cards with crappy art, and I'm taking stuff from point A on the West Coast to point B on the East Coast, and I'm drawing, I mean, I actually want to stab myself in the mouth right now describing it. What is it about train games that are so alluring? Well,
that's so funny because really, like, everything you're describing, I'm like, oh, yeah, sounds so good. Well, so the thing is, and it's funny, like, the games that I've come up with, so Dirty Birdie is a dexterity game that's 3-dimensional. I've got this other game, Valkyrie, that I'm working on getting signed now, and it's this incredibly cool, abstract visual puzzle that I just love so much. And so I'm really happy to play around in all different types of gaming spaces and vary my approach, like something more mechanics forward, something more whatever, all different types of approaches. And it's funny though, because like it's train games, the part of my brain that likes to be efficient and plan things really, really well. And in some cases, these games can definitely be multiplayer solitaire, and it's basically a race to see how much better I can do than somebody else at the same time. You know, for me, it's like those are the two main, you know, itches that scratches: efficiency and coming up with my own plan. So really, I thought about even back in when my school shut down, we went to spring break and then we didn't go back. And I thought about getting some of my games, because I was at my family's lake house by myself for those 9 weeks. And I thought about getting some of my train games and basically just having them to play by myself, because I could have, right? Like set my own sort of like limit as far as like how long I thought a turn should last, or like the game should last or whatever, to like make it so I was actually doing it, or just drawing cards and picking up and delivering things and just like tootling around on the board or whatever. Because I like especially the Empire Builder Crayon Reel series, but certainly I've played other games. But yeah, it just comes down to that, you know, just when you are able to create, and yeah, there's luck involved in terms of card draws and whatever else. Some games definitely have much less luck. I'm not a mathematician. I'm a visual thinker. So for me, 18xx games are an exercise in significant mental frustration. I think in pictures, I have to take numbers, convert them into images, and then basically from those, like kind of rework the model back down into numbers. I didn't realize that's why it took me so long to do math in high school. I thought everybody was like that, or I didn't understand how other people could do it so fast. So 18xx games and stuff like that, if people are cool with me having a calculator, you know, but generally speaking, they're honestly a little bit too long for me too. But it's just that sweet efficiency, baby.
How so German are you?
100%.
Okay, well, all right. Now, see, there are some stereotypes that are just fucking true. When you started getting a lady boner for fucking efficiency, I was like, this chick's a kraut. That's all I know.
Yeah. Family names: Held, Berger, Bernhardt, Henrik. Yeah, we're all there.
I'm going to go back to earlier in the interview. You're teaching history, then you go to gifted classes, and you grab a copy of Stratego, and then you just dive in full bore, right? And you discover Board Game Geek, and you're in it, right? How did you land the job at a school district where not only are you teaching gifted children, but you're in a school district that is so cutting edge that you're using game design on a variety of different platforms to educate these bright kids. How did that happen? Because that seems like you have a very charmed life. Now, I know you, and I know that you've worked very hard to get where you're at.
No, I agree. There's definitely a strong amount of luck. And, my 20s were definitely an exercise in doing a whole lot of things that did not work, from my time 3 years in DC. I was working, trying to help my friends start a real estate business. What else did I do in my 20s? I was a nanny. Well, I knew I wanted to go back to school and I could go to night school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I temped in law firms because I thought I wanted to go to law school. So there was a whole lot in my 20s as far as what I didn't want to do. And what I didn't want to do was be a teacher, because my parents are both teachers. My sister was a teacher, and I thought it was beneath me and easy and all this other stuff. And finally, after a number of different events, I was like, fine, I'll be a teacher. And then once I did, it was like going home, and it was in the course of my classes where I did this project. And this woman said, it was supposed to be a 10-day unit. This is actually a whole semester. And also you need to teach gifted. And it was like a light bulb, because I wasn't gifted classes as a kid. And I was like, oh my God, if I teach gifted, I could play all day, And I even started out as high school.
So it's just an extremely elaborate long con.
Yeah. For me to play all day long, for sure. I think in some ways, the school year is hard. And I think it's hard everywhere for everyone, parents, kids, I'm doing my best. The amount of work that I'm doing is just so much. Everything takes 2 to 3 times longer to do, from figuring out what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, how am I going to teach it, how am I going to assess it, how are kids going to return this, how am I going to grade it, how am I going to give feedback. Everything takes 2 or 3 times longer in the day. And then so much of what I've done in the past, I can't do, because so much of the work that I've done with kids requires them working collaboratively, working around the same table, small groups trying to figure stuff out. I don't know how game design is going to go next semester, because even if we have a vaccine and things look better, which all projections are, things aren't necessarily going to be looking better by January, so already thinking about ways like online games I can use in terms of how I can have kids play those and all that. But, we'll see, because maybe that will have to look different as well too, and they'll have to do a lot more play testing, with their families and stuff, and that may not happen. It's hard. But basically, when I got hired at my school just to teach gifted, I just remember they asked what led me there, and I think I gave them a probably longer explanation of from me as a kid to what plunked me in that room. And I just remember the woman who became my principal just oh wow, and I'm like, yeah, no kidding, right? But that's the thing. It's just it's such a natural extension of me and who I am. And my students are so much fun. And the work that we do is so much fun. I just absolutely love it. I love it. And I feel really, really lucky, really, really fortunate that they've let me do this, and there are some things for me, as I always say, that I am at the apex of teaching positions. One, I worked in an affluent school district, which means we have resources. My administrators are incredibly supportive of me. Our parents are incredibly supportive. We have a large, substantial gifted program. About 25% of our school is identified as gifted, as opposed to 3% of the population as a whole. So I only teach gifted. I'm not being pulled to do other things too. I don't tend to have any real behavior issues. My biggest problem right now is kids just having trouble getting work done and turned in because they're at home, and this is hard.
No,
for everybody right now.
It's terrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah. So, right. And I try to be really, really, and being really human about this, and doing the best you can and stuff like that, so, but I have the apex of teaching positions, and I feel like every teacher should have what I have. It should not be that I am so fortunate to be in this place, in terms of every teacher should have the support and resources to do what they know in their heart needs to be done. And luckily, I've been able to make that happen probably a lot more than most people, which is why when it comes to my website, KathleenMercury.com, I make no money from that website, and I give everything away for free. Everything on that website is shared with anyone who wants those resources on teaching game design, because I feel so lucky to be able to do what I do and to have the resources to build up this knowledge bank. And, you know, I mean, they even, you know, will support me going to game conventions during the year as professional development. And I mean, that's amazing. So I just have to, so it's definitely my way of trying to share with people as much as I can, how I've benefited, for sure.
You've gone to multiple conventions and sat on panels talking about game design, and I assume you've also discussed education in game design at game conventions?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sure.
Have you put the shoe on the other foot and gone to teaching seminars or teaching conventions and advocated for game design to other teachers and how it can be helpful?
Oh, I always am. I always am. I'm always the one at education conferences saying, I teach game design and you should too. And here's all the resources that you need. Here's all the questions, you know, and stuff like that. And I will, when people find my website, they email me. I'm always say, if you want to set up a Zoom call or we can talk about this, I'm happy to help you plan stuff out. I did that this past week. This guy's like, he's like, I can't get over how helpful your website is and all these resources. And he's like, I've got some questions. And I looked at the clock and I had like my plan time. I didn't have a meeting. I'm like, can you meet right now? So we talked for like an hour. And this is this week because every day this week was Halloween week. Every day this week I put on a different like creature makeup. And so I was, painted myself to look like the old witch from Snow White after she drank the potion and had like the big nose and everything. So like, we're on a Zoom call for like an hour and this has got like the old witch from Snow White talking to him, you know, whatever, but I don't care. You know, it's like, the more I can do to help people to get better games in front of kids, have them play better games, have them go through the process of design. I use game design. You can use all kinds of different things to have kids go through the design process and learn to work with that type of uncertainty. But yeah, that's why I do what I do.
Do you have a step one game? So is there a game that you would say, this is the game that I would go to as the first game to explore, on, you know, as essentially in the syllabus of game design as education, what would be game number one?
There's a number of small games I have kids play at the very beginning to have them learn a whole bunch of different game mechanics. And in thinking about that question, it would be Deep Sea Adventure. Deep Sea Adventure, when I have kids design their first game, after playing a bunch of other smaller games like Walk the Plank, Hey, That's My Fish, a whole bunch of other really great fun, Get Bit, fun short games, I have them design a race game because most kids' games like Sorry, Candyland, you know, Choose the Letters, they're essentially race games. So it's a familiar structure with them. And Deep Sea Adventure is a race game, but there's so many twists on the formula that it's recognizable to the kids. They can understand it in context, but there's so many little decisions that you get to make along the way that they don't have that type of, you know, agency in most kids' board games. It's got a really fun theme. And then when you add in the oxygen aspect and how the oxygen, if it runs out, then you don't get anything. And so you have to weigh your decisions against what the other kids are doing. I've had kids who in 7th grade were basically taking pre-cal at our high school, and yet they couldn't seem to predict that the oxygen was collectively running out. And you could see how much it's running out by the chips in front of other people. You can math it out, and they will still keep going deeper even when oxygen is going to run out. And sometimes it makes sense to do it. Sometimes it makes sense to just ignore the oxygen, get as much chips as possible to try to shorten the track and make them collectively closer. But then you're still making them collectively closer to other people. Like, it's so funny to me, but it's one of those things where you can have those really heroic moments when you need to roll a 6 and you actually manage to do it. Kids often don't even realize that the dice are 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You know, they're like, I can't ever seem to roll high. Well, yeah, you can't, genius, if you look, you know. I don't say that. I don't call them genius. Actually, that's a whole other thing. But, you know, in my head, I might think it. So anyway, no, I would say Deep Sea Adventure because it is so familiar to kids, but it is what it does it so well, and it's so fun. And then, like, having the secret point chips and the ranges, like, every aspect to it has a little bit of, like, twist, a little bit of uncertainty. And I remember I had this one kid, he played that game first day of school. So when they come into my class, there's games on the table, set it up, play it, this is what you're doing. And this kid looked at me and he's like, this is the best game I've ever played in my life. And I was like, well, and this is just day one, buddy. Like, right on, you know? So, no, I would say for me, if there was any one game that you're going to use to start with kids to get them thinking differently about games, it's Deep Sea Adventure.
Well, then because I love describing gaming like a relationship, what would be your classic, old, reliable, we dated in high school or early college and we haven't seen each other in 20 years, but I'm willing to settle down with you versus the new, fresh, super hotness? What are your two extreme games, right? The one that you're playing now that's new that you can't get enough of, but the one that you always, that one you always find yourself falling back in love with.
Well, I would say right now I'm not playing very many new games because,
you're not doing any of this bullshit online board game simulator stuff? I am. But like generally speaking, a lot of those are older games too, like on Board Game Arena and stuff like that. I've been really bad about playtesting games as much as I should be on because there's a whole bunch of different really great groups. Emma Larka has one in Seattle, Gil Hova's in New Jersey, Danielle Reynolds in Chicago. Really great online playtesting communities that are happening. And I just haven't been, it's just because I'm so zoomed out by the end of the day. It's really, really hard for me to get back on Zoom. There's just times I just need to decompress. But so talking about old faithfuls though, there's probably two, that I was playing with kids. I can pull out, and I've talked about this in any number of podcasts. If you ever heard me when I talk about my favorite games, so it's I am consistent. With kids, it definitely would be Escape. Survive, Escape from Atlantis. Oh my gosh. And so classic game, the island is disappearing. All your choices are really fun. Thematically and mechanically work so well together. For me as a designer, that's kind of like my vanguard game. If I could design a game like that. And then when the designer actually sent me a friend request on Facebook, which, a lot of people in the gaming industry just request friendships from other people they haven't met because it's kind of the space for that. I was like, holy cow, I have made it. If he knows I exist, so we even talked a little bit and I was like, but my other one, honestly, when it comes to games, all the games I have students play can all be taught, played, finished in about 45 minutes. Maybe not always, but especially if it's a little bit longer, more complex. But the one game that breaks that rule for me by far is Catan, because one, kids have to know Catan if they're going to be in gaming. When I got into gaming, everybody was really snobby about Catan. They're like, well, we used to play Catan, but now we play other things, And then new people would show up with their copies of Catan and be excited to play, and then they kind of get hit with that. And I admit, I was one of those people too. I played it once, and it's really easy to kind of fall into some of these game snob traps, And now I hate it. Now I'm just I don't care if you love Monopoly, you play Monopoly every you get it. You get that Monopoly. I don't want to play it, but you do it, I will always suggest Monopoly Deal if you want an alternative to Monopoly, because it's a super fun card game. It's all the fun parts of Monopoly in 15 minutes. Get Monopoly Deal, $5. Best thing you can do and not play Monopoly. But anyway, but for me, Catan is so fun. There's so much variance, and I have worked with Catan Studio at game conventions, so disclosure. But I've also, in doing that, I've been able to watch the U.S. Championships. The games where people win all the way, their local tournaments all the way up, so then they get to go play at the World, really high stakes tournaments. But it's still a really great community. A lot of the players know each other. They've been playing together for years. They room together and stuff like that. But the level of gameplay is so interesting as far as how they play it, and how strategically dev cards can come into it, and how they're reading each other. It's like watching poker on TV, and somebody's like, I know you don't have jacks. I'm just trying to decide if you have queens or kings. And then you see the camera and the dude's holding queens. You're like, how does he know that? You know what I mean? When but there's also the luck too. In one game, this was the championship game, and a 4 was never rolled. This guy was starving for brick. He just wasn't going to win, But when people play Catan a lot, that happens. Sucks that that's the moment that decided to happen. But for me, it's always fun, and I again, I work with Catan and all that. I'm not being paid to say this, but for me, it is a game that is so good. And if I could come up with a design that has that type of fraction of the impact on people that Catan has had, without question, I think anybody who dismisses Catan just out of hand, you don't have to like it as a game. There's certainly, if you don't like the dice, there's all kinds of things to not like about it, but you can't dismiss its importance as a game in terms of how it helped to make the world gamers. Right, no, it's white box D&D, right? I mean, it is not a game that personally I want to play, although I did play it the other evening when I met my buddy's new girlfriend, and I was starved for brick and took third place in a 3-player brick game because I couldn't get my fucking hand on bricks. But the point is that it's not something that I necessarily enjoy, but it has an essential place in what we do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just also happen to really like playing it too. So there's that. I like demoing that game with people. You know, that's super fun. And, you know, and if anything that gets people to the table, I'm 100% a supporter of without question.
So, Kathleen, if you could give us that website once again, because I suspect that there are fellow educators out there who have been just impressed by you and want to gain access to these resources that you have for free on your website.
Yeah, it's super easy because they're all just my Google Drive files. So you can find it at KathleenMercury.com, that I have that on there. And there's some other stuff. I'm trying to add more stuff from other units that I've done, like cosplay and all that other stuff, but it's just, you know, time is a resource. Yeah, KathleenMercury.com. Everything's for free. I make no money from it. It's just a labor of love to share all this with other people. And I guess just next year, take a look out. Watch for news about Dragonrock. Watch out for news about Reese Lightning coming from WizKids. I've seen the proofs on the art with it. Like, so it's like that moment when, like, you see at the bottom of the box, like, my name's on it. I'm like, finally! Yeah. I'm so excited.
I was on the GAMA board in 2015 when Travis Severance was the president, and he and, is it Justin, is the head of WizKids?
Zev Flashinger is in charge of it now.
Okay, but I guess back then it was a different guy. Okay. So yeah, it's all, I'm so out of the loop, Kathleen. It's terrible. That's why I started this whole podcast, to weasel my way back into the industry. But it has been,
I mean, I love the people, so it's super fun.
No, it's wonderful. I love the hobby. I love the people. But honestly, it has been super cool to hang out with you today. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm missing you, so stay well.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Why We Game is a production of the Influence Foundation. All rights reserved. Audio editing by Brodor. Music by Owen Godwin.